Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. The ACC is going to be a wild conference this season. There really, to me, is no clear frontrunner, and the odds makers seem to agree. And that was indicative by the jumbled mess we have at the top when it comes to these win totals, projected win totals for every single ACC team. And today we're here to break those down today as we get closer and closer to the start of prediction season right here on our channel. So welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, guys. We're so glad you could join us today. As always, please continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and check out everything down in the description below, including our website, thegridironexpert.com, which is home to our expert picks. That's some of the best college football and NFL spread picks in the entire country. They've beat out over 80% of the national handicappers each of the last 6 years. We're going to make it 7 years by the end of this season. It's one of the best deals in the entire country, and the earlier you sign up, the more content you get. It is one of the best deals out there, guys. We want you to take advantage of it. We want you to become a member of our GE Nation, and we want to continue to expand our GE Nation by representing your team in every single one of our videos. We've got some Syracuse gear, some Georgia Tech gear, so a little bit of ACC representation in the videos now. All of this stuff has been sent in by you guys, members of the GE Nation, and you can send us more of your team's gear at the mailing address down in the description below. We'll give you that shout out. We'll have it on display, and we want the nation to grow with more teams week after week as we progress through this season. So let's take a look at the ACC, guys. We said it was a jumbled mess at the top, and that absolutely is the case. Look at that. I mean, there's a handful of teams, feels like almost half the conference, even with the newcomers, that are at over 7 wins. That's pretty dang solid. And no team over 10 wins projected. Clemson, Florida State, Miami, the highest at 9.5 wins. And I think that's a fair assessment. I think Clemson and Florida State, that's not surprising to see them both at the top. Miami, maybe a little bit so, considering they've really failed to live up to expectations over the last 2 years under Mario Cristobal. Take a look at Clemson and Florida State, though. The Tigers are a perennial title contender every single year. We know that. Dabo Swinney has established Clemson as one of the premier brands and programs, not just in the ACC, but in college football. The thing is, Clemson hasn't really met their expectations in recent years. Yeah, a couple years ago, they did win the ACC again, but it's been a few years since they've made the playoff. Last year, didn't really live up to their expectations. And they've got a tough schedule. Georgia, App State, NC State, at Florida State, at Virginia Tech. A lot of tough games in there. And out of the games I just mentioned, there's a chance that the Tigers could be underdogs in 3 of those games. Truly, they're already underdogs to Georgia. I could see them being underdogs on the road against the Seminoles and on the road at Virginia Tech. Would not be surprised to see them be the underdog there. You lose those 3 games, you're hitting the under. Clemson's not making the playoff, and maybe not even the ACC championship. So it's going to be a very big and interesting year for the Tigers. Same can be said for the reigning ACC champs in Florida State. A lot of new pieces on both sides of the ball from Mike Norvell's squad. Opened the season in Ireland against Georgia Tech. Interesting non-conference game against Memphis. Not going to be a slouch there. At SMU, Clemson, at Miami, at Notre Dame. A very difficult schedule for Florida State, replicating an undefeated season. That's just not going to happen. Undefeated ACC champs that they were last year, not going to happen this year. They're going to lose a couple games. It's just whether or not they can lose a couple, still win the ACC, and still slip into the college football playoff, which they unfortunately were snubbed from last year. Miami at 9.5 feels a little high. I feel like we do this every year where Miami's getting a lot of preseason hype and they kind of fall short on their expectations. Maybe this year we're wrong. Maybe Cam Ward and Damian Martinez and Mario Cristobal finally figure it all out, and Miami truly does play like an ACC title contender. But 9.5 wins, pretty dang high there, especially when you look at the road slate. At Florida, at an improving USF squad, at Louisville, at Georgia Tech, which has given Miami issues over the last few years, and then home games against Virginia Tech and Florida State. Those are big games, but not surefire victories by any means. So a tough schedule for the Hurricanes. I'm not buying it yet. I think that's way too high. I would be more inclined to put Louisville at 9.5 wins than Miami right now. I think the Cardinals could be favored in as many as 10 games this year. Jeff Brom doing a phenomenal job in the transfer portal once again. Their 3 toughest games are on the road, at Notre Dame, at Clemson, and at Kentucky. If they can win just one of those games, I think they can hit that 10-win mark. I think they can find themselves in the hunt for the playoff, and I think they can find themselves in the hunt for an ACC title again, just like they did last year where they fell to Florida State in that championship game. NC State is another team that I really like in the ACC this year. 8.5 feels like a good value there. Their first 4 games are relatively tough, and really it's 2 of their first 4 that will define their season. The neutral site game against Tennessee in week 2, and then the road game at Clemson. Those 2 games will kind of define the Wolfpack season, whether or not they are serious ACC title contenders, maybe even playoff contenders, or whether it's going to be another disappointing year for the Wolfpack. But after their first 4 games, I think they could be favored in the remaining 8. So that's why those 2 games against Tennessee and Clemson are so important. If they can just even split those 2 games, and preferably you'd want to win the Clemson game more so than Tennessee because that's a conference game, you win just one of those games, the Wolfpack have a great opportunity to win out the rest of the way, and they will be in the ACC championship, and they will be in the hunt for a playoff spot. 8.5 wins, some say, is high. I think that's just right. Could even argue to put it a little bit higher. North Carolina, some books have them down to 7.5 now, no longer 8.5, but a couple of interesting games there. A non-conference game at Minnesota. Got to play James Madison at Florida State. So it's an interesting year. What's it going to look like life after Drake May for the Tar Heels? A lot of questions there for Mac Brown's squad, but he typically does get the most out of his team. How they fare early on in the season, though, will dictate whether or not they hit that over-under. SMU, they are the highest win total of the newcomers. SMU, California, Stanford, all joining the ACC this year. SMU comes in as the best with 7.5. I think that's a little bit low. I think the Mustangs could be even better than that. They've got a veteran quarterback, a strong offensive line, a very underrated defense. What this comes down to for SMU is the non-conference. They play BYU and TCU in the non-conference. They've got to win those games. If they do, their toughest conference games are a home game against Florida State and a road game against Louisville. So if they win their non-conference games and they just split one of those conference games that we just mentioned, the Mustangs will challenge for an ACC title in their first year in the conference. And we've talked about that a lot this offseason, that they could not only challenge for the conference title, but could challenge for a playoff spot in their first year in a power program. The schedule lines up extremely well for them. I think that number's low because playing a power program every single week as compared to not doing so for many years in the American Conference is going to take some getting used to, but Rhett Lashley's squad, I believe, can handle it. I think this number's low because of the adjustment period. There might not be as big of a one as people think for SMU. I'm inclined to maybe take that over, although we're not predicting anything just yet. That'll come, again, here in just a few weeks. Virginia Tech's another team that could very well crush their projected win total here. 7.5. Some books do have them back up to 8.5. I think the Hokies could start 4-0, and then it's what they do in conference play after that. They return the most production of any team in the country this year. Got a veteran quarterback, a very underrated defense. Their toughest conference games are on the road at Miami, and the home game against Clemson. That home game against Clemson is going to be absolutely massive for both of those programs. But Brent Pry is reestablishing, rebuilding this Hokies program, and I think he's going to hit his stride in 2024. This is a dangerous, dangerous team. And for me, a bit of a low total considering some of the high expectations that Virginia Tech does have this year. California in at 6.5. How about that? They were a bowl team last year. They need to be a bowl team this year if Justin Wilcox wants to remain the head coach there. Again, kind of like some of these other teams that we mentioned, how they fare in their first 4 games will be very telling. California has a road game at Auburn in the non-conference and a road game at Florida State. If they can split one of those, could be a solid year. You lose both, you got a lot of ground to pick up after that, especially with games against Miami, NC State, and SMU. It's going to make it a little bit difficult. So this is a team that I think could go bowling. This is a team that I think maybe is flying under the radar a little bit in the ACC, but they're not the best of the 3 newcomers. SMU takes that title. And again, just reaching 6 wins would be an accomplishment for the Golden Bears. Duke and Syracuse also at 6.5. Duke, for some books, down to 5.5. For Syracuse, some up to 7.5. Syracuse has a very favorable schedule, but we'll get to them in a second. Duke, first year under Manny Diaz, I think they're going to be better than people think. They have a lot more talent on that roster than people realize, even with the departure of Mike Elko and Riley Leonard and a handful of other key players. If they can beat Northwestern in the non-conference, there's a chance the Blue Devils can start 4-0. Then they have tough conference games later on, North Carolina, Florida State, SMU, Virginia Tech. But if they find a way to get to 4-0, Duke will go bowling. And that, again, is an accomplishment in year 1 under Manny Diaz. Same can be said for Syracuse. Going bowling in year 1 under Fran Brown would be a heck of an accomplishment. And I think they can do that. They only have 1 road game in their first 5 games of the year. And that 1 road game is on the road at UNLV, which is a very winnable game. Syracuse could start 5-0. If they do that, they're going bowling. Even 4-1, I think the Orange get to a bowl game because after those first 5 games, the toughest game left is the road game at NC State. So a lot of winnable games on the schedule for Syracuse, a lot of favorable home games on the schedule for Syracuse. People don't realize that Fran Brown's one heck of a recruiter. He did pretty well on the recruiting trail, did pretty well in the transfer portal, and the Orange could surprise a little bit with a first-year head coach. Georgia Tech at 5.5 seems a little bit low. I feel like Brent Key is building something with the Yellow Jackets, kind of rebuilding this program, but took a big step forward last year with that bowl win over UCF, but they've got just a tough schedule. I think it's low, but it's a tough schedule. Florida State, at Louisville, at North Carolina, Notre Dame, at Virginia Tech, at Georgia. I mean, you just can't get past that. I mean, that's a tough schedule. And drawing Georgia and Notre Dame in the non-conference is far from ideal. 2 potential top 10 teams when Georgia Tech has to play them. Again, just getting to another bowl game would be an accomplishment for the Yellow Jackets. I believe they can do that, but 5.5, while it does seem low at first glance, probably is about right. Same can be said for Pittsburgh, who had a very disappointing season, jumping the gun and believing in Pat Narduzzi to get back to 7, 8, 9 wins. Not quite there yet. Still a lot of questions that the Panthers have to figure out. Road games at Cincinnati, North Carolina, SMU, Louisville. Not a favorable schedule at all for the Panthers. And then you round out the last few guys. Boston College, Virginia, Wake Forest, all at 4.5. Boston College, honestly, probably the best of those 3 teams, in my opinion. The Bill O'Brien era is going to be a lot of fun to watch with the Eagles, and they have a lot of young talent there that if he can get a hold of it, could lead Boston College to a bowl game. But the Eagles play at Florida State and at Missouri very early in the year. They later on have road games at Virginia Tech and at SMU, so the road slate is brutal for Boston College. With the first-year head coach, this could be one of those years where Boston College ends up finishing the year with finishing the year as a team that's much better than their final record shows. They just couldn't get over the hump with the slate they were handed. So that's very well what could happen for Boston College this year. Virginia and Wake Forest are still trying to regroup. Still got a long ways to go for both these programs. Wake Forest draws Ole Miss in the non-conference. Not ideal. Virginia draws Maryland and Coastal Carolina, along with road games at Clemson and Notre Dame and Virginia Tech. And it's funny to me how some of these lower-level teams are drawing some of the better teams in the conference. Funny how that works. That's what's happening for Virginia, Wake Forest, and that's definitely what happened for Stanford. Poor Stanford. First year in the ACC for the Cardinal. We know they're going through a major rebuilding project right now, and their schedule includes road games at Clemson, Notre Dame, and NC State, as well as home games against Virginia Tech, SMU, and Louisville in a season opener against Big 12 foe in TCU. So a tough schedule for the Cardinals. Somehow, arguably the worst team in the conference this year. Drew all the top dogs in the conference this year. And, of course, their annual game against Notre Dame in the non-conference, which is never easy. So, obviously going to take a while for Troy Taylor's squad to get back to where they need to be. But that's the ACC win total, guys. Couple surprises, couple teams that we think are too high, couple teams that we think are too low. But, of course, we'll have our official predictions, our official win totals of our own when prediction season rolls around here in just a few weeks. But until then, leave your comments below. Tell us who's too high, who's too low. Should these teams be tempering their expectations so they have higher expectations? We want to hear from you down in the comments, and we also want you to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and check out everything down in the description below, including our website, thegridironexpert.com, where you can become a member of our GE Nation. Take advantage of it, guys, because you're not going to want to miss out on anything we have coming your way once this season starts. And the season officially starts with prediction season. It doesn't start in August. It starts this month. So do not miss out. Become a member of our GE Nation. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on The Gridiron Expert.